Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Chris Mo with us. He is CEO and co-founder at Cartograph. So today we're going to talk about how his agency manages one of the biggest consumer brands out there in the Amazon realm, in the e-commerce realm. He works with brands that we all know, such as Kettle Fire and Magic Spoon, these amazing cereal, and a bunch of other brands, which we'll discuss about today, Lemon Perfect, Belgian Boys, and so forth. This podcast is brought to you by podpar.com. That is my podcasting agency. If you want to start or scale and monetize a podcast, it is also brought to you by Qualia Mind. It is a supplement produced by Neurohacker for focus, for memory, and for energy. I would guess helps me as an entrepreneur to crunch my 16-hour days. So I take it on the reg. This one is a caffeinated version. You can get it on neurohacker.com/Qualia. Welcome to the pod, Chris. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Sure. So thanks for having me. Excited to chat. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cartograph. We're an Amazon agency. I'm based in Austin, Texas, but we're spread all over the US. We're about 60 people strong. We are a full service Amazon agency that specializes in CPG. So with our brands, the ones that you mentioned, we really specialize in food and beverage, work with a lot of D2C brands, supplements, beauty, and baby and pet. And we help them do everything on Amazon, everything from figuring out what they should sell on Amazon, how they interface with Amazon, building their content and running the ads. And we've won awards for the ads. So we manage that for about 90 brands actively, manage about $300 million on the Amazon platform annually, and spend about $30 to $40 million on ads across Amazon's pay-per-click ads and DSP.
Interesting. And your background started at McKinsey. What prompted you to start your own CPG agency?
Started my career at McKinsey and did consulting there all around the world for different consumer brands for about 5 years. I had actually started working with some emerging or like startup brands in consumer and understood some of their challenges with go-to-market and figuring out their strategy and launching, and then was approached by my co-founder who I knew from college. And he had built the first Amazon team at GE in consumer electronics, built that to a really big business about 10 years ago. And then realized his passion wasn't selling light bulbs and extension cords. And so started working with consumer brands, really better for you brands, and called me up. And so Cartograph began, we really focused on better for you food and beverage. In fact, like a big angle that we had is we were really good at like the keto movement of 17 and 18. And back then Amazon was a real place to kind of like a small brand to get an outsized share because a lot of the big brands weren't playing on it. And if you had really good, if you had like a good differentiated product attribute, you could really take over search with that. And so it's been about 6 years and we're still growing.
Very cool. How do you get your clients? What's your go-to-market strategy?
Sure. So we basically think about our business kind of like a real estate agent, like a realtor. So we need to be present in the market for when people move, right? Realtor can't knock on everyone's door and say, hey, do you want to buy a house? You have to find the people who are moving. And Amazon agencies are kind of similar, tend to stick with somebody for a number of months, and we tend to sign year-long contracts. And so what we do is we have a pretty consistent content and relationship engine that we drive year-round, where we talk to about, we talk to like 300-400 brands a year. And then we have a monthly newsletter, we have regular LinkedIn posting, and we basically cultivate that list for when people are ready to buy. And then we have a two-stage, sales and proposal process where we come up with a custom pitch for each brand.
Interesting. And is it more outbound? Is it SEO? Is it ads? How do you get them?
Yeah, so it's actually mostly inbound. just by being present in the market. We spent 3 or 4 years building up our reputation, and then we have a pretty good qualified list. We get a lot of referrals from our existing clients, and then our content engine, between the newsletter and posting on LinkedIn, we get a lot of reach from those, and then Slack channels and so forth. We do some outbound, but again, our philosophy is actually just a smaller number of outbound messages, very very custom and bespoke to people when we think they might be in a buying phase.
Right. And then what do you sell exactly? Is it packages? Do you guarantee results? Why do people come to you?
Yeah, good question. So our business models, we sell an outsourced solution for the Amazon question. And so what that means is, like, you're basically hiring an external e-commerce team for the Amazon platform. So it's everything end to end, from like, what should you sell, managing your inventory, building your pages, running the ads. And so that's what we sell. Like, our contract track structure tends to be a percentage of sales. And so, we'll start with some minimums. Usually our minimums start between $4,000 and $8,000 a month, but we try to do pure commission contracts most of the time. And I think the reason people come to us is because of our track record and expertise in the categories that we play in. Like, we've worked with a lot of the leading brands in food and beverage, in direct to consumer, in beauty, pet, and supplements. And so we really know the ins and outs of those categories: repeat purchase, understanding your customer, understanding like life cycle of the customer, inventory constraints, short dated product, all that kind of stuff that really ends up being how you win or lose in these categories.
Would you picture a day in which Amazon wouldn't be the main platform in which people would buy? Like Shopify has came pretty close to somewhat challenge that. And what do you have to say with all the tech advancement we're seeing in AI and no code?
Yeah. So, so two questions in there that I'm going to break into two. So first is Shopify versus Amazon, and then the second one I'll address, like, AI, no code. Do we become less relevant? So first on Shopify and Amazon, we have historically, I think for us as a business, it's never been a better time to be an Amazon agency. Back 6 years ago, you really had to prove to D2C founders that they should even take Amazon seriously, because there's so much concern about, I don't know the data, I don't know if it's worth it. Nowadays, we don't really have those conversations anymore. And I would say, moreover, our D2C brands tend to, like, on average, if you're a D2C brand, your D2C channel is bigger than Amazon, usually by a factor of 3 to 10. Is that many times bigger on D2C if you're like really acquiring. But a lot of the brands that we work with have a little bit de-emphasized their D2C, usually because acquisition costs are getting really high, mostly on meta platforms. And so that's been one of the changing and total number of people who are buying on it. And so Amazon stayed really relevant. I'm gonna pause because I think we have a connection problem. We back? Okay, cool. We can edit that out. So the next question you asked was about AI, no code, and whether or not what we think about the future. So I think there definitely are things that will change the landscape for agencies. One of the risks that I've always pondered for us is, could Amazon become a place that's a lot easier to work with as a brand? Could it be a platform that's a lot easier to interface with? And I think the answer is probably not. Amazon does not make it really easy to work with them. They don't enforce their rules consistently. There's a lot of like really difficult to read gray areas in how you get things done. And then they continue to implement a lot of pretty arcane policies. Recently, there's been a lot of chatter about inventory placement fees and low inventory fees. where if your inventory gets too low, they charge you more money. And if you don't ship exactly the way that they want to ship, you get charged money as well. And so that's just a classic example of like working with Amazon is just such a pain. And so if that were solvable by it, then you could automate it, but it actually just continues to get more complex, which is really challenging.
But Amazon is simpler than getting into Costco. So what would be a potential evolution to Amazon? Let's say that I'm an entrepreneur and I have this product. Shopify doesn't seem to make it that easy for me. Would it be a chat interface in which I could be like, hey, what should I sell? This is what I'm good at. This is what I like. This is my experience. It would suggest product with real-time prices that I could create. It could suggest me a niche and so forth. And then it could commercialize with agents my product on their platform or on various platforms. What are your thoughts on the future of being an e-commerce entrepreneur and actually making a profit, because it's not easy?
Right. Those are all really good use cases actually for AI, and I think they're totally valid. Product research, pricing, competitive intelligence, content creation. The hardness of Amazon is that they're very difficult to understand. Difficult to understand is the wrong word. They're inconsistent binary gates where Amazon will randomly say, oh, you actually can't sell because you didn't do this or that. Or your product's not going to be merchandised because of this or that policy. Or like you're not going to get traffic because this wasn't optimized in this way. And so I think fundamentally that's what I think our mode is that a model is only as smart as the data set it can be trained against. And Amazon has a really terrible data set because they don't actually have rules you can train against. You have to it's like a third level of problem solving. It's like, okay, have you seen it before? And they've changed it again. And do you know about how they seem to react to changes in problem solving? I think it's not something that AI tends to do. And then also, I think one of the problems, I think an interesting analog for this is actually product recommendations, right? Which is largely an unsolved space, right? Amazon's basically given up on product recommendations. A big part of it is because variable weighting is really hard. and so it's a similar thing. Like when you have binary variables or variables that change weight dramatically from circumstance to circumstance, your model, it's very hard to build a model around it. I'll give you an example. Part of the reason why shopping recommendations don't work very well is because generally, like a performance engine has identified that the best recommendation for a shopping product is recommending a product that somebody just bought or an analog like of a competitor that somebody just bought. And it's because in the balance of all things, it's the most likely thing that somebody will buy, that they will buy the same product again. They'll be like, oh, I actually need two. I'm going to get one for a friend or so forth. But you and I can say that's ridiculous. Like I buy something once, of course I don't want to be recommended the same thing. But how do you explain that to a performance engine, that it's actually statistically the most likely to convert recommendation that's garbage the majority of the time to an ordinary consumer? And so that's a really weird example of recommendation engines that I think AI still hasn't figured out.
Right. Yeah. It seems that Amazon has such a moat as well. It's not always the best product. You still need to have a look at reviews. Me, I personally bought just like Amazon's badge products or whatever.
Sure.
Amazon Essentials also like a safe value, I guess. And then the one-click checkout, and then they're so reliable. Plus, you can return the items to get your money back if you're not satisfied. So, yeah, tough to get. You've probably studied Amazon extensively and Jeff Bezos. Like, what have you learned from building these behemoths of brands?
Yeah, I mean, you named a lot of the good things there. Like Amazon has done a tremendous job in making a high trust, low friction experience, and that was it. If you go back to like some of the earliest Bezos letters and emails and so forth, um, I think the one that resonated with me the most is there were a couple key points. One was he said the most valuable thing that they could do was get Prime subscribers because it's a very low cost revenue source. It was basically like very much like Costco, membership based model, and drives so much free cash flow for the business. So that was one. The other thing that that Bezos said was that people irrationally value free shipping, like so irrationally, as in they will pay more than the net of shipping rather than pay shipping, right? So they'd rather pay $10 more for the product than have a $10 less product and like an $8 shipping cost, because like paying for shipping is so painful. And so I think those two were just examples of really understanding the consumer psychology. And so much on Amazon is about high trust, low friction. So our job as an agency is like, what can we do to make a high trust, low friction buying experience? So you mentioned a couple of them: reviews, ratings, really clear content that actually tells the story of what you're getting, that like feels reliable and trustworthy. And then also making sure that it's actually going to ship quickly. There's like a ton of trust that, you see that Prime badge and you're like, okay, it'll come in the next couple days. All super valuable. And like the funny thing is, what we do on the back end can affect that sometimes. Like if you get inventory management wrong, your shipping will be slower or you'll be out of stock, and actually harms your ad performance as well.
Very interesting also that you currently manage like yourself 200 well, you've worked with 200 of these, and yeah, I believe nowadays you personally manage like 100 of these high growth brands. You take a percentage of what they make. What about equity? Have you thought about getting into this?
Yeah. So you got it right. Yeah, our model tends, we work with about 100 brands. Model tends to be that we take a percentage of sales as our revenue model. We do have some equity positions in some brands. Um, in our early days, we would do equity deals. I think when we work with a brand, we like, usually when we'll do a renewal contract, we'll sometimes join their cap table and say, hey, we see the value here. We really want to join. And there's really positive implications for the working dynamic. You really feel like you're part of the team. But yeah, we don't overextend ourselves in doing so. I think sometimes it can muddy a little bit the relationship if you do it right off the bat. Like somebody considers you on their cap table, they might assume that you do anything for them, or like um, you would share special intel on them, or intel for them. For example, we work across so many brands. There's definitely competitive overlap, and taking equity positions kind of creates a little bit of a potential conflict. And so we have really careful policies on how we work with competitors, and we don't sign non-competes. And so yeah.
When is the right time to exit? When do you know that, yeah, this is time? Is it like an energy and a passion thing? Like I'm no longer into this, or is it that my company has reached the highest level of the bell? Like when do you recommend to have a nice little exit first?
Yeah. So I guess I'll answer that in a couple ways. One is, I think optimizing for an exit as a founder is a fool's errand. Like you need to find a way to enjoy your job and get paid by it on a regular basis. Obviously, easier said than done. But we've worked with so many founders that, even these like tremendous success stories, it's very hard to get that exit. Even if you grew to a big business, like things can fall apart. The deal can fall apart. Your sales can fall apart. Like lots of things can go sideways. And so I think it's very prudent to find a way to like make sure you're compensated and you're happy with how you do things, um, outside of an exit. The time to exit, I actually think it is very much an energy thing. Um, Running a business is hard. I mean, one of my design philosophies as an entrepreneur is you need to build a system where you don't have attrition on a day-to-day basis. Like you need to have a sustainable day-to-day that you can sustain for 7 to 10 years, because that's like really how long it probably is going to take. And if you get down to a year and you're like one more year and you're going to sprint, it's probably not going to work out. Usually when you say that, it takes 2 to 3. Um, and so it's really important to build something sustainable. And also, if you're pushing for an exit and you don't have the ability to say no and say, no, I'll find someone else maybe next year, your outcome is going to be dramatically worse. And like you see that a lot of times too. Someone at the last second is like, oh, I'm going to pay you 50% less. And the person is already like in their mind, I'm retired, I'm going to buy a house, I'm going to take time off. And they're like, oh my God, all my work down to that moment. Am I going to say no and get back on the treadmill for another year? So I think it's really important that you sustain your energy and like don't try to exit when you're at the end, or it's just a good chance it doesn't end up the way you want it to end.
Do you think that agencies scale as a general? Do you want to scale your agency or have an exit yourself?
Yeah. Scaling an agency is hard. We've done it. And most people don't do it because it doesn't always rationally make sense. Like you can make good money and exit an agency before you have to really face true scaling. Like I like to say that there's kind of 2 layers of scale, or 2 or 3 layers of scale in an agency. There's where you run all the work. Then there's a point where you trust somebody else to do the work. Then there's a point when you train somebody to trust someone else to do the work. And then there's layer 3, where it's almost like grandchildren, where you have to trust somebody to train somebody to trust someone else to do the work. And each level of abstraction there is like a really high risk of dilution of quality, or dilution of brand, or just like it's a totally different challenge as a manager. And so I talk to a lot of agency founders. I think those numbers tend to be at like 10 employees, 30 employees, 50 employees is like roughly. And every one of those thresholds, you need to have super tight operations of like, how do you do training? How do you do performance management? How do you do people development? All that kind of stuff. And so every agency founder kind of has to choose, like, do you want to do that problem? Because it's very different than advising a company. It's a totally different job. And so, yeah, to answer your question on exit, do you plan to exit our agency sometime in the future? There definitely is some benefits. Once you get some scale, you get better multiples as an agency. And so that's kind of where we have circled on the board.
Thank you so much for today, Chris. Where can people find out more about you?
Sure. I mean, the best place to see our latest breaking stuff is on LinkedIn. So look up myself, Chris Moe, on LinkedIn. Look up Cartograph on LinkedIn. We post content there weekly of pretty in-depth Amazon insights. You can also check out our website, www.gocartograph.com, and then feel free to email me. I'm Chris at gocartograph.com.